Welcome to the third part of semantics. This is the last part, definitely the hardest part, and kind of requires some syntax to understand this, so this is why we did semantics afterwards. And today we're going to talk about theta roles, or thematic roles. Either one of the three ways you see it on the left is how they're written down, and these are interesting. Now we're going to classify words based on the role they play in the sentence, and specifically the role in relation to the predicate of the sentence. So what is a predicate? Well, a predicate is usually the action word or description word. So here we have loves, hid, and flew. So the linguist loves mouths. So the linguist is an argument to the predicate, and so is mouths. What about Miles hid his bald head? Well, Miles is the person doing the hiding of his bald head. So the predicate is the verb here. You can also have the sentence like James is happy, and this is happy predicate takes the argument of James. So is happy can also be a predicate, and James is the argument of that predicate. Now, what role do these words play? Like, what role does the linguist play? Or Miles, or Jesse, or James? We know they're all noun phrases, but depending on the predicate, they can take on different roles. So, there's 9 of these, and these are not easy to understand the first time. And I'll just say that right away, these are not going to be easy. It's perfectly okay if you don't understand this the first time. And it's not about memorizing words, it's not about memorizing verbs, it's about understanding relationships between words and the predicates, so it can be tough at first. So let's start off with agents. Agents are initiators of actions. So we can see here we have the word attacked in Brad attacked Steve. So Brad is the attacker. He is the person that is initiating the attack, so Brad is an agent. Now here's something a little bit more obscure. Here is an inanimate object that is initiating an action of hitting. So a falling book hit Steve. Well, this object, the falling book, is hitting Steve. Now, it might have been caused by gravity, but it's still the agent that is hitting Steve. So, a falling book can be a little bit tricky to understand, and it might be possible that another theta role that we talk about might fit this object a little bit better. And that's okay. It's okay to have more than one theta role per noun. So, that's an agent. An agent is an initiator. There's something very closely related to an agent called the experiencer. Now, this is a little bit different from an agent because there's no physical action necessarily being done. And it's a little bit hard to understand the difference, especially with this first example of James saw the moon. So, James is the experiencer here. He's not an agent because seeing is not something that requires an active motion necessarily. So this is where it gets a little bit trickier. So let's do syntax frightens James, or syntax frightens Steve first. So Steve is experiencing the emotion of being frightened. Syntax is frightening Steve, and Steve is experiencing that fear. So you can see the experiencer here, it makes a little bit more sense. Now when James saw the moon is an object in the sky that exists, and James is experiencing the moon through his perception. So he is perceiving the moon, which is why James is the experiencer of saw. So a little bit challenging, but an experiencer, experience or perception of an event. So for instance, Michael heard the orchestra. Michael would be the experiencer because he is hearing the orchestra. So that's another example. Now we're going to talk about themes and patience. Some books will separate the two. It's not really necessary. They're kind of the same thing. And it's basically the entity that undergoes the actions. They are moved, they are experienced, they are perceived. So this isn't the perceiver, the experiencer, or the undergoer. This is the thing that is... I don't want to say experience. This is the thing that is just undergoing everything. So in Steve loves cookies, well, love is our predicate here, and cookies is the patient theme. It's sort of, I guess the best way to say is the topic of the sentence. And you can kind of think of theme as you would in English, sort of, a little bit, and that, what does Steve love? Steve loves cookies. The whole topic of the sentence is around the cookies. Or what about a falling rock hit Steve? Well, we know a falling rock is the agent here. So the thing being hit by the agent is the theme. It can also be the experiencer sometimes, but Steve is getting hit, therefore he is the theme. The cookies are being loved, therefore the cookies are the theme. So these are the three main theta roles: agent, experiencer, and theme. These are the most important ones, for sure. So now we're going to move on to 6 other ones that are a little bit less important, but you should still know them. And we'll come back to an example later of these 3 initial themes, or 3 initial theta roles. Okay, a goal. This is a little bit straightforward. A goal is the entity towards which motion takes place. It's another way of saying the end result of the sentence. So, I went to Chicago. Well, where were you going? You're going to Chicago. Now this is different from location, and that is a very important distinction to make here. This is not a location, this is a goal. So I went. Went is a verb. You go somewhere when you say went. So I went to Chicago. This is the goal of the verb went. Here's another example that's a little bit more abstract with this goal definition. You were given a lecture. Okay, I'm saying that you is the goal. Now why? Okay, well, given is a verb to give something, and they gave the lecture to you. So you were the goal of the verb. You were the goal of what was being given. So if I were to say I gave Mary a pot, well, Mary is the goal in that sentence since I'm the one giving a pot to something, and that something is Mary. So goals can be a little bit of an abstract notion, and again, these are difficult distinctions to make right away. So when we get to location, we'll talk a little bit more about what exactly location is in comparison to goal. So there is one thing. There is a recipient, and when I said Mary gave June a pot or whatever, well, there's another role there, and that's the recipient. It's the receiver. It is sort of a type of goal, but I would suggest you just focus on this notion of receiver. The recipient is exactly how you use it in real talk, so just ignore type of goal. And if you know the definition of the English word recipient, then this is probably the most straightforward theta role there is. So June gave Summer a winter gift. Well, Summer is the recipient because she is the one receiving a gift. Now, this is also the goal of a sentence. So, this is a noun that has 2 theta roles because you're giving a winter gift to Summer. So Summer is the recipient of the gift, and it is also the goal of the verb gave. Okay, maybe a little bit confusing at first to think, hold on a second, how can it be a recipient and a goal? But Summer is receiving an object, and Summer is the destination for that object. Therefore, Summer is the recipient and the goal of this verb gave. Okay. Hopefully that made sense to you. If not, again, you can pause the video. You can leave comments, please. If this doesn't make sense to you, leave a comment in the comments section. I can definitely clear things up with more examples if necessary. So, source. Clearly, if there's a recipient, there has to be a source. So, Julie gave Jessica the book. Here's a source. Julie is giving Jessica, which we know is the recipient, and is also the goal of the sentence, the book. Now here's a question. What is the book? Now use your knowledge of the previous theta roles. Is the book an agent? Is it a experiencer? What about a theme? Yeah, that seems about right to call this book a theme. So Julie gave the theme of the sentence to the recipient. Yeah, it kind of makes sense, right? The book is the thing that's undergoing movement. You're giving the book away, so the book is the thing that is being given. Therefore, it's the theme of the sentence. And Jessica is the goal because that book is going to Jessica, and Julie is the source because Julie is the one giving the book. Again, these are things that are a little bit more abstract than just looking at words and figuring out what's going on here. So, again, I emphasize, 1, practice sentences, make up sentences, play around with verbs, see what happens, and 2, take your time and realize that some objects can have more than one theta role. Now we're going to get into the 3 least important ones. And these don't come up too often. Locative verbs, not necessarily related to thematic roles, but if you're studying languages other than English, you're probably going to deal a lot more with location than you would in this language. So location is fairly straightforward. It's the place where the action occurs. So we all learn at school. Well, clearly, school is the place that we're learning, so this is the location. We usually include the preposition in the theta role for location. As you can see when I say I play games on my computer, well, the playing is done on the computer and the preposition is also included. So location, pretty straightforward. In fact, let's go take a look at this other sentence. I went to Chicago. Well, Chicago we know is the goal, and awesome enough, it is also a location. So again, it has 2 theta roles. Now, of course, the distinction is abstract because went has a goal while playing games does not have a goal. So if you look at this sentence here, I play, well, play doesn't really have a goal, does it? Normally when you say play, you take the word play and you usually have a person here, which would be an agent, more specifically, and then you have usually a theme here. So you play something, you play games, you play movies, and then this on my computer is just an adjunct. So it's just saying, oh, here's some extra location info. So it's not necessarily a required argument of the verb play, so it's not going to be a goal. It's just going to be a location. Alright, instrument. Instruments are not really ever pointed out in examples or ever. I've never seen an instrument on an exam before in linguistics. In fact, I'm pretty sure I've never seen an example of an instrument in a textbook other than just giving it a definition. So you can see how important this instrument, a theta roll, is. Steve killed the man who makes up examples with an axe. Okay, well, here's the main predicate, killed. Steve, let's label this whole sentence if we can. Steve is our agent here. He's the one doing killing. The man who makes up examples is the person being killed. So he is the theme or the patient of the sentence because he is being killed. And the object with which the theme is being killed is the instrument. In fact, any sentence that can be used in the game of Clue to solve a murder is going to have an instrument in it. For instance, Professor Plum was killed in the dining hall with the candlestick. Well, with the candlestick would be the instrument, Mr. Plum would be the person who was killed, and of course you also have a location there. So, I would say instruments, yeah, pretty straightforward. You know, if you see something that looks out of place, that doesn't really have a theta roll, it's probably an instrument. And of course there's one more here. This is the benefactive. Makes more sense to say benefactor, you know, depends on the textbook. But this is the entity for whom the action occurs. So here's the key, for whom, which means that something has to be done specifically for someone. Now this is very hard to realize syntactically, so you need to use your brain for this sentence, or for these benefactives. You need to have a decent grasp of the English language. So if you are a second language learner, if English is your second language, this might be one that's a little bit more challenging. This first example, I felt bad for Steve. Well, feeling is your predicate, and you're feeling for this person. So they are the benefactor of the emotion here. They're the benefactor of the verb. Now, this is a little bit easier to see because we have this word for here that kind of matches up with the definition. But in this second example, for she made Steve a cake, well, you think, well, hold on a second, isn't Steve a goal? Isn't Steve a recipient? Well, yeah. So recipient, definitely, the recipient of the cake. Is it a goal? Well, a recipient is a type of goal, so by definition, yeah, it's a goal. It's kind of a weird goal. But the cake was made for Steve. Now, this verb has some meaning to it. Now, the easiest way to see this is to kind of paraphrase the sentence. So she made Steve a cake can be paraphrased to she made a cake for Steve. Now, this is kind of like a hidden for here. That's a little bit hard to see if you don't think abstractly and paraphrase. Sometimes paraphrasing is necessary, but you can kind of see that if she made a cake and she made Steve a cake, well, then clearly the cake was made for Steve. Otherwise, Steve wouldn't be included, so we also have Steve being the benefactor here. So that was a lot of theta rolls. Very difficult, honestly. This is in my opinion, this is the hardest part of semantics. This is the hardest part of syntax for me too, is trying to properly label sentences, find thematic relations, seeing what's going on. If there's pronoun movement in trees and stuff like that, that'll be introduced in a later course. Theta rolls are tough. So we're going to do an example here. Again, this is a very basic example, but we can see a lot of different theta rolls going on here. So Brian gave the book to Mary. Well, Brian is giving, so he is an agent, because he is the one doing an action. he is also the source, because Brian is giving something to Mary. And if there's a source in this sentence, then there must be a goal in the sentence. So to Mary is the goal, and Mary is also the recipient, because she is receiving. Now, what is she receiving? Well, she is going to receive the theme of the sentence, which is the book. So we have a lot of theta roles here, and we have double theta roles on some of these. So Brian is an agent. Brian is also a source. The book is the thing being given, so the book is going to be the theme or the patient of the sentence. And Mary is the goal and recipient. Now, here's a good question. Answer this yourself right here. Is Mary a benefactive? Now, this is a question of semantics here. Well, we're in the semantics unit, so clearly it's a semantics question. But Mary is not necessarily a benefactor. And I'm going to go back to this definition. The entity for whom the action occurs. Now, for whom, the giving isn't done for Mary. It's done to Mary. And that is a key distinction that has to be made here. Brian isn't giving the book for Mary. So, is there a way we could make this sentence have a benefactor? Well, we could. In fact, let's change the sentence to Brian gave the book to Mary for Bill. Now, in this case, for Bill is going to be the benefactive. Now, he's not the one receiving the book. He's not the one that is the goal for the book. But he is the one that the giving is being done for. So Brian gave the book to Mary for Bill because Bill couldn't do it himself. So Brian is doing it for Bill. Now, again, this can be kind of tricky to understand, so if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And congratulations, you've made it through a nice introductory video to thematic roles. And it's tough. It's tough, I get it. It's very tough. When I write a practice exam for TrevTutor.com in the Linguistics section, I will be sure to include a nice couple theta role questions. Now there is one thing I should probably cover right away in case some people have questions now, and they say, hold on a second, these guys have 2 theta roles. Now, in my class we're asked to give 1 theta role. What do we do? Well, there's only one thing I can tell you to do, and that's ask your professor. Now, really, it doesn't matter which one you pick. As long as you pick one and you're consistent through all your examples, Brian can either be an agent or a source, Mary can be a goal or a recipient. Doesn't actually matter. As long as the noun has at least 1 theta role, everything's okay. But what you should use in your exam depends on your course, so you should ask your professor. And that's the best way to put it. Alright, that was theta roles. Next time we're going to start morphology, which we're going to talk about free versus bound morphemes. We're going to introduce morphemes. We're going to talk about roots and affixes. And we're going to draw some trees for morphemes. And they're going to be a little bit easier than syntax trees, I promise. Anyways, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And I'll see you guys next time.